Hey guys, this is Chris Jones for a special episode 35 of Beyond Local. Today we're going to be chatting about enterprise SEO. This is part one of a three-part series where we're going to interview some of the top enterprise SEO people in the world. Today we are so lucky to have John Shehata, who is the Vice President of Audience and other roles at Condé Nast. John, welcome.
Thanks, Chris, for having me. Hi, Kyle. I'm very happy to be here with you guys.
Awesome. So before we dive in, I also want to introduce our co-host, a very familiar face to the Beyond Local podcast, the Vice President of Search at LSEO, Kyle Cozy. Kyle, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So John, I'm really grateful that we've become friends over the last number of years. I've had the opportunity to learn from you through your experiences at Condé Nast and elsewhere, but I want to make sure that the audience of our podcast gets to know you a little bit better. So if you don't mind, let's start first with the personal bio and feel free to kind of go into some detail, maybe more than you ever have, just sharing with the audience how you got involved in SEO and then share with them the timeline to the point where you're now in such an important role at Condé Nast.
Sure thing. So personal. Okay. So I was born in Egypt originally. I lived half of my life over there. And then I think when I was 17, I visited the States for the first time. I fell in love with the States. Fell in love with everything, the good and the bad. So then I kept visiting when I was like 18, 19, and 20. I said, this is the place I'm going to live. This is where I'm going to spend my life. So when I was 20, I decided to stay, had to work a couple of years, really hard to save any money for college. I was a pharmacist, or like almost half pharmacist, like finished 4 years of my school to become a pharmacist back in Egypt, but I decided to take a whole different turn when I came to States. I hated pharmacy, so I hated chemistry with passion. So I applied for computer science, got accepted, finished it in 3 years from Rutgers, got my bachelor degree. So I started all over again, right? And then, I think originally I was developing C++ and Java for desktop applications and stuff like this. And then I ended up working at some agency doing some development for SEO stuff. I remember I worked on an inclusion script. Back in the days, Yahoo allowed paid inclusion for results that will look like organic results in the SERPs. So there was only very few agencies allowed that. So I was working on that and I fell in love with SEO, got into it little by little, and I have been doing SEO among many other things for the past maybe 19, 20 years now.
That's exceptional. So did you have any stints at any other brands or companies that other people would know prior to Conde, or how long have you been with Conde?
So I've been with Conde 6 years now. Prior to that, I worked at Disney. So I managed their search and social for ABC News for a couple of years. And then they asked me to oversee ABC Entertainment, Disney channels for kids, Oscars. I worked on Oscars for like 4 or 5 years. What else? I worked on ESPN. I helped optimize Reddit. A few other stuff. And before that, I worked for Conde parent company, which is Advanced Publications. So this, I don't want to say back in the dark days, but this is what like news SEO was like a completely new thing, right? And to go speak to publishers and newspapers on how to optimize their content for search sounded like voodoo or like insulting back in the days. I helped optimize 35 local newspapers and 18 different sites. So I don't know, a lot of big newspapers that you guys are aware of, like the Plain Dealer, the Star Ledger, and so on, a lot of them. So yeah, that's my history, 3 companies and a couple of agencies.
So John, it's amazing to hear that bio, because it reminded me of conversations that we've had, or I've been in your presence, where you've talked about your advanced publication days, or when you were at Disney. So it's one of the most impressive resumes I've ever heard in this space. Congratulations, right?
Thanks.
So you worked for Condé Nast, one of the top publications in the world, and people probably heard of it, but it has a very, very impressive brand portfolio. So can you just chat a little bit more about who Condé Nast is and some of those brands that end up, to the best of my understanding, kind of reporting into you in your role?
Yeah, absolutely. So Condé Nast is one of the top publications or publishers worldwide, with a magnitude of premium brands like Vogue, New Yorker, Wire, GQ, Glamour, Self, Bon Appetit, Epicurious, and so on. I don't want them. There's so many of them. I don't want to lose anyone, but there is about 20 premium brands in US and across the world. So a lot of these magazines and digital sites are in Europe, Western Europe, and APAC, and Middle East, and Asia, and so on. So yeah, it's a global company with amazing premium content. I'm very blessed to be working there.
Super cool. So yeah, Kyle and I are going to kind of kick off asking you some questions about your experience as an enterprise SEO expert. So the first one I want to ask you is, well, first, can you, your role at Condé Nast? Again, I called you sort of vice president of audience, but I think I probably underplayed that. What is your exact role there?
So I'm the VP of Audience Development Strategy and CRM. It oversees multiple teams. So I have the global SEO team, both on content, commerce, and tech. I have the social media strategy. I oversee also podcasts, email, and CRM. Yeah, that's about it. Just making sure.
So you have lots of people writing content for the various publications that you oversee. Share with us, if you will, how you wrangle all of that content production into a system or into a strategy from an SEO best practices point of view.
Oh, absolutely. So we respect the craft. Let me put it this way first, right? The same way we ask people to respect how SEOs work within the company, I also ask my team SEO to respect the craft of every team that they work with, right? So when they work with developers, they have to respect the craft. They have to understand the expertise and the complexity of some of the stuff that they're asking for. It's not easy. I always tell my SEO team, never say it's easy, right? It's like, you don't know the complexity of the systems and the infrastructure and so on. And when we work with editorial teams, it's the same thing. You have editorial resources and teams and talents who have been doing this for decades, right? This is a craft, right? So when we get there, this is the first thing, right? That's our attitude, is we respect the craft, right? Now, the second thing is like, there's different types of content, right? And SEO might not be suitable for every type of content, right? So there is the opinion pieces, right? SEO, I wouldn't be involved much there. There is the news content, right? Or the trending content. SEO can help tremendously, not just optimizing the content, but uncovering the trends that empower the editorial team to make educated selections of what content they're gonna be writing about, right? It was like, when we tell them, here are the trends that are relevant to you, right? And we have some tools in-house, and then they can say, yeah, this is important for us, this is important for us, and this is match our editorial strategy, we're gonna be writing about these, right? But we don't tell them you have to write about this, right? And then there is the evergreen content piece, right? Which is like, there's a couple of aspects to that. It's the gap analysis, right? Are we continuing, like one of the things I see in all publishers, what I call file and lock. You write a story and you file it and you lock it and you forget about it and you go to the next story, right? So we try to say, you know what, search and online internet in general, nothing is forgotten, right? You have this amazing asset that you wrote a year ago. It requires some love. So we have refreshes strategy, we have gap analysis strategy, subtopic strategy, and so on. So we work very closely with the evergreen teams. So each type of content, if I say, will require a different SEO strategy.
Yeah, super interesting. Kyle, would you like to ask the next question?
Yeah, sure. So I think you touched on something there. And I mean, I have a couple follow-up questions. I don't know where to start, but we'll start with what you said about the news articles and how SEO could affect that. And I did some research on some stuff and some roundups that you've been a part of recently. And I know there's, again, Google's constantly changing the SERPs, but there's major changes happening to the SERPs in terms of how they show news stories. So if you could give us a little bit of background on that, of what you're seeing, how Google is changing the SERPs to show news stories, and then how Condé Nast is thinking about that.
Sure, absolutely. So stories, the good news is stories is gaining more real estate in SERPs like never before, right? I think when we started top stories, which is the news carousel or the news box, everyone call it differently, right? But Google now, the official name is top stories, because they changed it from top news to top stories after the whole fiasco of misinformation and false news back around 2016. That was like the let's change it from top news to top stories. So anyway, regardless, so top stories, right? I remember early in the days they started with 3 articles. 1, 2, 3. Simple, or desktop and mobile, the same kind of SERPs, and then it evolved. Mobile becomes its own thing, and mobile first index, and then mobile started with like 2 text links on the top and maybe like 3 AMP links at the bottom. So it went from 3 to 5, and then Google introduced the AMP carousel, or the top stories AMP carousel, which extended up to 10 articles. And then now we have up to 30 links in top stories, 3 carousels, right? So now this is where we are right now. Like if you compare the 30 links within the news section alone in the SERPs to the 10 blue links, right? Traditional 10 blue links with all the feature snippets and everything. That's huge. We have seen top stories up to like maybe 40% of SERPs if you count just links and as a share of voice, right? So it keeps increasing. And we wrote an article in NewsDash. I forgot to mention, I'm the founder of NewsDash with a Z, NEWZ-.com, which is like an analytics tool for SEO. We collected the top trends and predictions for 2021 from like 16 top expert news worldwide. And the one thing that kept coming from a lot of the experts, Google will continue to introduce more features into top stories. So you're gonna see 2 stories on top of each other within the same card, right? It's like, this is the main story, but you should also be reading this one, right? It could be a different point of view, it could be an expansion, and so on. We believe there are gonna be videos and there are gonna be other formats. So the diversity of formats beyond links will start being introduced in top stories.
Real quick question on AMP. So how have you guys been thinking through the traffic sort of living within the AMP ecosystem versus coming over to Condé Nast? And are there any strategies that you could recommend to actually earn the traffic through Conde?
Okay. So when you talk to SEOs, either they're like hate AMP with passion, right? Or like in love with AMP, right? I'm indifferent, right? I'm more or less like, I don't know, an accountant or a lawyer that wants to make sure their clients are doing great, right? So I use whatever means in my arsenal, like white hat, for sure, right? To get my clients to the place that they deserve, right? So, and for me, it's just another means to do that, right? A lot of people are talking, as you know, right, in May of this year, Google will remove the requirement of AMP to be in top stories, right? So this is big news for publishers, right? And a lot of developers and a lot of publishers is like waiting for this mass exodus, right? It's like, let's kill AMP. So I was actually speaking to Search Engine Journal the other day, Lauren, yesterday, and he was asking similar question. And my recommendation was like, don't kill it yet, right? You have to test. One of the great skills that SEOs have is the ability to test things, right? It was like, we don't do mass changes without testing, right? So I was recommending first to test AMP on evergreen content. After it gets published 7 days, right? Then you kill AMP and you see the impact on evergreen or residual traffic. Things would go fine, then move to the next phase, right? It's like cancel or delete AMP on a section of your site, a medium traffic section, right? And see how things are going. Things go fine, move to the next phase and so on. Now, I believe Google will compare AMP Web Core Vitals against non-AMP Core Vitals, right? So, so if you don't improve your site till May, and you still have all the traditional issues of publishers or any other site, and your site is slow and so on, and you can't do much about it, I would say leave AMP as is. But if you can bring your site to be as performing as AMP or better, then absolutely start the test. So that's my view on it.
That makes total sense, or too much sense, I guess, because the AMP pages are obviously going to perform better in terms of the core web vitals or speed, because obviously they're stripped of all that styling and all that bulky stuff that's going to slow them down. So it makes total sense. I think coming back to the content side of things, what I would ask is, so we talked about the news stories and how that's changing and how much equity that's going to have in the SERPs. So like your team writes a lot of content. How do you guys think about like content freshness, and how often do you push things out? Because obviously one of the goals is to show up in some of those, in the news sections for some of the articles that you're pushing out.
Yeah, so my team specifically don't write content, except a very specific area that we own, right? But in general, all the content and the publication and the cadence is owned by the publisher, the magazine, right? It's like either Vogue or Wired and so on, right? We give them specific recommendations on when to publish certain content, especially around seasonal content, right? It's like when you talk about like Black Friday or Amazon Prime Day or these kind of seasonal trends, we know exactly when is the best moment to get there. And when you talk about content freshness, right? I believe content freshness is one of the strongest factors in top stories, right? So yes, is like there are certain tactics around how you refresh the same content. Is it the same day? Is it the next day? Is it a live going story, right? One of the things I track in NewsDash is like, is this trend, does Google understand the trend as a live ongoing story, right? So we see, for example, oh, Google is displaying more articles that they update their headlines, which means they updating their story as well, right? So within 4 hours, we have seen half of the results with new headlines at least 3-4 times. So we understand Google is treating this trend as a live ongoing story. So there are certain indications, right, on how should you treat a story. It's like, hey, if you're writing about an Apple event, Google is expecting a live story, right? Not just a one story. There is the multiple stories around all the different angles, but at the same time, there is like ongoing coverage as a live story.
John, one of the things in getting excited for this interview today, I wanted to ask you is, I think enterprise SEO as it relates to content is probably one of the biggest challenges that a lot of enterprise companies face. Now, in your case, you're a publisher of 20 plus brands. So can you speak to that process? How do you you've already mentioned that you use insight tools to look at trend data, et cetera. But is there any other tips that you have for other types of enterprise businesses or enterprise SEOs to help them put in place some standards around SEO best practices when writing content?
Sure thing. This is actually one of my favorite topics, right? Because supporting 20 brands, and now we support all the global brands. You can't have a team of 100 people, right? It's not doable, and it's not efficient, right? So how can you do so much with so little, or like with an efficient team, right? Structure, or lean team, let me put it this way. I spoke a lot over the past 10 years actually on the different tactics that I use around enterprise, how you can do with lean teams. So one of the things that is, you have to be in their workflow. One of the big mistakes of SEOs is they trying to pull editorial teams out of their workflow to do something which interrupts their workflow to go back. It will not work. They might do it once or twice, and that's it. This is the end of it, right? So what do I mean by workflow? You have to understand what tools do they use. So a writer will use probably 2 or 3 tools. They will use either Google Docs or will use Word doc, right? They will copy and paste the content into the CMS, and they will use Slack for communications. These are like the top 3 tools. Now, you want to get good SEO, you need to get your SEO recommendations in these tools. Okay, so you can build, for example, a plugin for Google Doc or for Google Doc or Word doc, right? It was like, which can give instant recommendations, right? They will love it, they will use it. It's right there in their medium where they write content. Or as we did in Condé Nast, we wrote a very comprehensive I don't want to say scoring, right? But it's like recommendation engine for all the writers within the content management system, that as they write and save the content, we will give them recommendations. It's like, hey, your headline is missing maybe this, or comparing your competitors or whatever ranking in Google, it's the content is not comprehensive enough. These are some entities that are missing, you know, we need more internal links, you know, let's make the content more rich, right? Add a couple of images, add a video, and so on, right? These kind of recommendations. This is after we train them once or twice already on SEO. So they have this, but if you train them for an hour, hour and a half, not everything sticks, right? It's like, so they get a couple of important stuff, and then you complement it with the tool as a continuous reminder. A lot of tool tips, right? And so on. Then we use Slack, for example, is like I mentioned to you the trends monitoring that we have, right? So we used to track all kinds of trends and see what's happening around the world. Now it's like, but this is overwhelming and this is too much. Now let's use our data science team to create a model for us, right? That calculates relevancy of different trends against different brands. And let's only Slack that brand, that very specific trend, if it passes a certain threshold. So they're already in Slack, we're not overwhelming them, and we're telling the right people, is like, hey, this is important trend for you. You wrote about this 20 times before, it got you a ton of traffic, it's trending right now. So if you can get in their workflow, you have absolutely better results. So this is one of the tactics that we use. There's a lot of tactics, but this is one that I have found very useful recently.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I love that you said that, because I feel like if you disrupt, especially on the content side, if you disrupt their workflow, I'm not sure what the quality is going to look like after that. So in terms of that research and what you're putting into their workflow, do you have a team that does that, or do you fully automate that? Because I know there's a lot of like keyword research that has to occur. Also, which pages should you internally link to? And then even we do a lot here at LSEO looking at the intent of a keyword, right? So analyzing the SERPs to see what Google thinks is the intent behind that keyword. So I'm just curious how you guys think of the research that goes in and entering it into that workflow. I know you mentioned entering it into the workflow, so I was just curious of how you think about getting that research done. Is that internally, or do you automate that?
So we have 3 types of projects. There's an article level project, there is a template level project, and there is an initiative, right? The article level project, someone is writing an article, we give him the research tools within the article itself, right? I'm writing about this. Should I use this keyword or this keyword? What are the top trends around this? So it's already in their CMS and they can do the research, and we train them multiple times, and we'll give them access to like a simplified tool outside if they want to go deeper into like getting more information and so on. So this is an article level kind of research, right? There is a template level research, which is like helps us on scale, right? This is a template for article, or this is a template for gallery, this is a template for recipe. So we optimize the heck out of it from a tech and a content, from a layout and design and so on, right? So you do this once and you do it very well, you impact millions of pages, right? So this is the second level. The third level is an initiative, right? Hey guys, I don't know, winter fashion, very important coming. This is the things that we're going to focus on. We meet with the brand, we identify, we do deep research, right? It's like, okay, this is the topic that we need to own. These are all the subtopics. This is the gaps. This is where we have strength. This is where we have weaknesses. Work with the editorial team. How much production will go around these different topics, what we need to optimize for, detailed recommendations before the project starts. So this is how we approach it on like 3 different levels. Does this help?
Yeah, definitely. That's what I was looking for.
Cool.
Awesome. So the other one, John, and by the way, I think your explanation around how to produce content and maintain it is really, really brilliant. But one of the other things I wanted to talk and kind of double click on is automation. And so is there anything else, any other tips that you could give on how to produce content at scale? And this might go beyond Condé Nast. You know, I had a podcast with technical SEO expert and a buddy of yours and mine, Mike King, a month or 2 ago, and he was talking. He got really kind of nerdy on some of the AI that's out there in terms of producing content. But do you have any tips for folks on how to produce content at scale?
Unfortunately, we don't, not unfortunately, we are not in that business, right? Creating content at scale, right? But I think maybe there are a few tools out there that can create content briefs. Some of them are good, some of them are not that good, right? So they can scan all your site, they can recommend what's missing, right? There are expensive tools for sure, but they do an awesome job, right? And they can tell you, these are all the topics, these are all the briefs, this is what other sites are talking about, this is the important entities and so on. So they make the whole brief, and then they still hand it to a writer to put all of this together and write it, right? That's one option. I have seen other sites also do a lot of translation. So automated translation APIs, and then a human editor will just massage it and make sure it's correct. I have seen this working for a lot of people. Also working for publishers that have like multi-language and they want to scale their content, taking on consideration that this content is relevant to the other markets as well. There is also a lot of other new technologies that are coming out there. I think, is it what, GP3 or something like that, or GT3? That allows you, it creates content briefs for you or content summaries for you for all the content, and to the point that you cannot recognize if it's written by a human or a bot, right? I know of some publishers for the financial reports, numbers and stuff. Most of that content is written by bots, and it's no longer written by humans, because it's like, hey, so-and-so went up by 3 points and this went down by, I was like, why a human being needs to actually write all of that. So I know a few financial publishers out there are using that.
Actually, let me just, before Kyle, you ask your next question, and we have about 10 minutes left just to give everybody a sense, the audience, as well as you, John, because I know you're a busy guy. So I want to ask that question a little bit differently so it's more relevant to our audience. Freshness, you've already mentioned, is critical. So what about repurposing? Do you guys have a strategy around that to make content fresh? Are you writing it from scratch, or do you have strategies of using old content and making it fresh?
So 4 years ago, I started a project on Condé Nast. It's called the Evergreen, pine trees. project. And pine trees are evergreen, right? And the idea was, I went to the company and I said, can you give me some budget on refreshing older content as a test? And we started that test and we saw like 200% increase in traffic for these pieces. Now we're at a point, most of the brands, a part of their quota of their work is refreshing older content. We did a massive number of studies and we found recently that most of the content, the evergreen content, loses the majority of their traffic within 9 to 12 months, right? So this was not the case long time ago. You will see content in Google that is written 5, 10 years ago. Rarely you see this, maybe 1 out of 10 links, right, in Google, right? So freshness, not only in top stories, I'm going to put it on the side for a second because it's a whole different game, but even within the SERPs, the top results, fresher content works well if optimized well in improving all the quality signals. So yeah, I'm all for repurposing, and especially around evergreen content, it really works well. And you easily create in Google Sheets a tracker of your content, and then when you see an evergreen content drops, let's say beyond 25%, it sends you like an alarm, or you write a script, an email, or you look at the sheet every day and say, oh, this is the piece of content that we need to work on now, and so on.
Got that. And I think that's such a clever name. I love that. So since we only have 10 minutes left, I kind of want to shift just a little bit from the content side of things. So you mentioned technical as well, because you oversee a couple things at Condé Nast. How do you guys think about technical? Do you handle all that in-house? Do you outsource it? Because technical SEO, getting it right, can require a lot of time and effort. Just making sure that you have the proper resources in place or in-house to fix all of that stuff. So I'm just curious, like, how you guys go about what's top of mind from a technical aspect, and do you handle that all in-house or do you outsource it?
Sure. So a long answer for this, right? A long time ago, an SEO was supposed to do everything. You will know content, you will know tech, you're a numbers guy, you become a data scientist, you will do link building, and you do outreach. And as the industry matures, you know that that's not possible, right? You can't have one guy doing everything, right? So the bigger the client is, the bigger the company you're working for, you reach a point where you need to have specialized teams, right? So we have a team focused on content, and we have a team focused on commerce, and we have a team who just started about a few months ago, just focused on technical SEO, nothing else, right? And we started the team with 1, and we're going to grow it to 3, right? Because it's complex infrastructures and AWSs, and like Fastly is doing so, and then the whole JavaScript rendering and so on. So you need someone who really has passion for it and understand it well. So I'm all for like specialized SEO skills at a certain level.
Yeah, I love that, because I think that comes back to what you said about the content and disrupting the workflow. Is if you have somebody focused on a bunch of different things, the outcome is going to be way down the road to get it fixed. So if you have certain team members or individualized teams focusing on just one part, that's going to streamline success faster for you or a brand like Condé Nast. So yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Can I say one quick tip I used a lot? Okay, before I had like tech teams a long time ago, or engineers, development teams could be your best ally or your worst nightmares, right? Nightmare. So I used to go, whenever I started a new company, bring a box of donuts every Thursday and leave it at the development team's desk, right, where they sit, and I write note is like, from SEO was love, or something cheesy from John or something, right? And I would do this every Thursday. And believe it or not, after a while, people will come and search for who is this John is leaving us a box of donut every Thursday. And then they start talking to you, right? And they get to know you. And if they work on a small project with you and you get them some visibility, it's like, hey, look at this team. We were accomplished with them, working with them so much. They want to work with you more, and so on. just a quick tip if you don't have a technical SEO team in the house. So
No, that's great, because I think, and I've experienced that in agency life, is, again, I've been part of agencies that have always had a web development or web design team that was within the agency. And one thing I've learned as an SEO is they don't think of you the same as they think of you as another web design or a web developer. When you ask them to fix something because it's important to SEO, they kind of look at you like you have two heads. But I'm guessing the reason you did that is to kind of get in with them, and they'll help you fix some of those SEO aspects. Because I know what I've learned is some of those developers or designers are hard-headed, and they don't really want to help you with SEO. They just want to develop and design a website to the best of their ability, and they don't really, or they don't all the time think about the SEO aspects that need to go into a website.
It's not their priority, right? Their priority to have a stable site that's functioning right for the user, and that's their priority. Everything else becomes second. So it's like respecting the craft, going to the early what I said, right? Respecting their craft, they will come and respect your craft as well.
Yep.
I have two quick questions. The first one is, each of your publications probably have, authority of 70 plus. So, but how do you think about links? Is it mostly from an internal linking sort of strategy, or do you also think about offsite links and earning links, back to your site?
Okay, the best known/unknown secret of working for a publisher: you never worry about link building. Period. I don't think maybe I was fortunate enough for 18 years. Never worry about link building. It comes naturally. You write great content, people like it, and people want to link to that great content, right? It's harder when you have a commerce or B2B or other industries, right, to acquire these links. When you're a publisher, it just comes to you. It's like you don't ask for it. The only thing you worry about is people trying to buy links from you. So
that's hilarious. And that makes sense. And really, we'll have two more of these enterprise interviews. And I want to make sure I find someone who the opposite is true, where they're in such a hyper competitive industry where page level authority matters and stuff like that. But the other question I have for you is, as an enterprise SEO, over the course of just a extraordinary history of different huge enterprise companies, what are some of the common obstacles that you face? It seems like one of the things I love about you, John, is it seems like you're such a solutions focused guy that you've solved most of the problems. But what are some of the difficult ones that maybe at the beginning stages of any of these jobs that you had that were the hardest?
I wouldn't claim I solved many of them, but I enjoy solving them, right? I think problem solving is one of the things as SEOs we enjoy, to have a challenge and look into it and figure out how to solve it, right? So I think on a human side, right, is like getting back to like understand the priorities of the teams you're working with and aligning your objectives with their objectives, right? The company could be focused on completely something else, right? And you are talking about H1s and, whatever, footers and stuff, right? You will never align, right? You will never make SEO an important factor in their success. So figure out their success and their objectives and inject SEO to make them successful. SEO will become important there. So that's a big challenge, right? How you can get SEO prioritized with a huge queue of projects and initiatives that are revenue driven, right? Understanding their craft, I keep going back to them, understand their workflows, you will get better results. Education, right? A lot of SEOs get frustrated. Oh, we did training last year, and it was like, they don't remember. Yes, they don't remember because they have 100 other priorities. They need to do fact checking. They need to do work on the visuals. They need to write a really great content and so on. So don't expect them that you trained them for an hour a year ago, that all that knowledge is like, this is the first thing so manage your expectations yourself, right? It's like, and work within their workflow and keep training them, keep educating them, create hubs, right? If you get the same question twice, create an FAQ doc, you know, also, oh, thank you, here is the answer for this question. So you train them actually to look for it, give them tools to fish within their workflow and so on. So these are some of the challenges I faced. And I think the last challenge is a lot of SEOs get surprised because they get hired by big companies and then they get there and it's like a one man or one woman team, right? It's like, it's a huge company. Where do I start, right? Start with low hanging fruit. Don't make huge changes. Gain trust and authority within your company. We're talking about AAT of our content. Let's talk about AAT within our own companies, right? When people see that you are the person who gets it done and get results on a lot of small projects that move the needle slowly, they will give you the opportunity to work on a bigger project. Just don't give them a 60 pages document for your next project. Break it down, you know.
Great advice. Kyle, did you have a final question before I ask John one final thing?
Yeah, I'll ask one more, and I hope it's not a duplicate of your question, but obviously we chatted about a lot about SEO on the content side of things. We just chatted a little bit about technical, but in terms of you overseeing all that, I just have a question and would like to know, or maybe it's just for the viewers, if we could give them a piece of information, because Condé Nast is a large company, but how do you think about SEO success when you're overseeing all of that? What metrics are important to you? Obviously we always look for traffic, but do you have certain goals associated with SEO that you look at to gauge your success for a company like Condé Nast?
Sure, absolutely. So I think for the longest time, I wrote this last year, for the longest time we looked at SEO as a scale function. I look at it now as a business function, right? You need to understand what are the KPIs for your company. What is success is defined in your company. If the company is talking about subscriptions or commerce sales or whatever, and you're talking about traffic, again, they're not aligned. You have to translate traffic into whatever KPI they're working with. If the main KPI of the company is time spent, you have to translate your traffic into time spent, right? And once you do that, you start to understand that not all traffic created equal, right? Some traffic will produce better results on the final KPI. You know what? When we, let's say, for example, write long form pieces, we get more subscriptions. When we write a roundup of products, we will get more commerce sales. When we do this, we get that. Once you align traffic with the final KPI, you understand where you should focus, right? So I think every company has a different KPI. SEO needs to stop being a scale function. I was like, hey, we increased traffic by 20%, right? Good, amazing, right? But it's like, does this traffic matter for the final KPI for the company or not?
Yeah, what happened with it? That's always the second question is, you developed this much traffic, all right, what happened afterwards? And I think that's always a lot of SEOs struggle to answer that question, or agencies struggle to answer that question for clients or brands that they work with. And it's the most important question, I believe.
Yeah.
Super awesome. Well, John, thanks so much. Final question is really going back to NewsDash. You know, I've watched your passion over these last 3 to 5 years really just amplify around this new company that you have as sort of a side hustle. Can you tell us a little bit more about NewsDash? What is it and how can people benefit from it?
Sure, thanks for asking. So I'm a product guy at heart. I developed SaaS when I was in college, and I sold it, and this is how I paid for my college. I didn't have much money. So I'm always developing products for companies I work with. About 5 to 6 years ago, I contacted every single SEO tool out there, all the big names, without mentioning anyone. I say, hey, publishing industry deserve their own tools. None of the problems you're solving for overall the broader SEO, some of it apply to publishing, but there is a lot that don't apply. And everyone said, nah, we're not interested in that. It's very niche, it's very small. We're not focused on that. So I said, okay, if no one wants to do it, let me build it myself. So I built it about 5-6 years ago, and it was mainly for me and my career. I analyzed every single article that gets in Google News. Who are the top publishers? What's the frequency of content production? what is the authority on the different sections. So you will see, for example, CNN very strong in national, while Fox News very strong on entertainment, and CNN is not the same caliber, right? So you see all these different things, right? And then I took it a step further, is like how trends apply to authority in SERPs, right? So I start tracking every single trend out there and then track their rankings within the SERPs as they happen. So stimulus check or whatever we tracking, right, is like, okay, look, this kind of trend that is categorized as finance, these are the top 5 sites within authority against finance. Is it the same thing in Google News? And now Google News give me a window into Google Discover, right? It's like, because the way we crawl Google News, we don't do searches in Google News, but we just grab what's highlighted by Google. So it's like, if they deem these stories are very important in entertainment, what if I have a persona who is very interested in entertainment news? Do these two correlate, right? And so on. So it's about last year, I believe, I opened it for everyone. A friend of mine said, why are you keeping it for yourself? And we started doing, and so far I think we have 5 of the top 10 publishers in US, and it's growing. Almost every month, 1 to 2 new publishers are joining. So it's good. I'm enjoying helping other publishers, empowering them with data. So yeah, it's going very well. Can't complain.
John, I am just so impressed with you. I think this was a phenomenal interview. I know people, and I know it's going to be an evergreen one where people are going to enjoy this for many weeks and months to come. I really want to thank you for being part of the Beyond Local podcast. Kyle, thank you for co-hosting with me. I wish you nothing but the best, John. And we'll see the listeners and the viewers for episode 36 next week. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, guys, for having me. I truly enjoyed it.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, John.